Forget the golden spike. Forget the handshake in Promontory. Forget the myth of two brave armies, one eastern, one western, meeting in triumph. The true cost of the American dream, the one that chained a continent with 3,000 miles of iron, was paid not in gold, but in a currency of forgotten blood, shattered bone, and the silence of 20,000 Chinese men who were erased from history. This is the story of the greatest engineering feat of the 19th century, a monumental achievement in American ingenuity and greed, and the stunning, terrifying truth of the hands that built it. A hidden history of explosive risk, extraordinary endurance, and a systematic betrayal that only now, 150 years later, is being brought to light. The Reckoning of Granite and Greed, 1863. The Curse of the Comstock. The year was 1863, and the United States was tearing itself apart. Yet even as the smoke of Shiloh and Antietam choked the eastern air, a fever, a greater, more blinding gold lust than any before, was sweeping the West. It was a greed not for nuggets in a stream bed, but for the very earth itself, for a vision of an impossible, unbroken connection that would stitch California to the Union. This was the vision of the Transcontinental Railroad. In Sacramento, the center of this frantic energy, stood four men who would forever be known as the Big Four. They were a quartet of ambitious, ruthless, and utterly interconnected businessmen who had secured the federal mandate and land grants for the western portion of this colossal project, to be built under the name of the Central Pacific Railroad Company, CPRR. There was Leland Stanford, the elected governor, a man whose political influence ran as deep as his ambition. Collis P. Huntington, the master strategist and financial muscle who manipulated Congress from his New York base. Mark Hopkins, the cautious, stingy bookkeeper who watched every penny. And the quiet, technical genius, Theodore Judah, the true visionary who had first surveyed the route, though he was already a ghost in this tale, having died of yellow fever, conveniently leaving his grand plan to men more focused on profit than purity of engineering. But on this freezing January morning, in the drafty makeshift offices of the CPRR, the Big Four were facing a problem far more daunting than finance or politics: manpower. "The line is drawn, gentlemen," Stanford declared, his voice booming with the false confidence of a politician. "We have the contracts, we have the land grants, 10 square miles for every mile of track laid. We have the charter to cross the Sierra Nevada, but we have no hands to swing the hammers." Huntington, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with skeptical lines, spat a stream of chewing tobacco into a brass spittoon. "The Irish quit faster than we can hire them, Governor. They're lured away by the Comstock load. The silver in Nevada is a siren song louder than any patriotic duty or daily wage we offer. A man can make $20 a day underground in Virginia City. We're offering $35 a month and the certainty of breaking his neck on a granite cliff." The challenge was not just labor, but the scale of the labor. The route, Judah's brilliant, deadly route, demanded the line ascend the nearly 7,000-foot granite ramparts of the Sierra Nevada. This wasn't building track across a prairie. This was a war against nature, a necessity to carve shelves into vertical cliffsides and blast tunnels through solid rock, tunnels that would total over a mile in length, the longest being the Summit Tunnel, at nearly 1,700 feet. "We need an army, Collis," Hopkins interjected, his voice thin and reedy, "and one that won't desert for a rumor of silver." It was then that Charles Crocker, the burly, no-nonsense construction superintendent, a man who believed sheer force of will could move mountains, slammed his fist onto the table. Crocker was the doer of the Big Four, the man responsible for turning the blueprints into reality, and his frustration had reached its peak. "There is another answer," Crocker said, his eyes narrowed. "The Chinese." A collective dismissive scoff filled the room. The sentiment toward the Chinese immigrants in California, who had arrived in mass during the gold rush, was one of overwhelming xenophobia. They were seen as weak, unsuited for heavy labor, and most damningly, an alien presence in the new American West. They were called Celestials, and a mix of mockery and fear. "Crocker, for God's sake," Stanford groaned. "They're skinny little men. They wouldn't last a day in the powder smoke. They only weigh 110 pounds. Can they even lift a sledgehammer?" Crocker leaned forward, his massive frame dominating the table. "I don't care about their weight, Governor. They built the irrigation ditches. They built the canals. And more importantly, they don't quit. Their own people won't pay them for a job half done. They're meticulous, they're sober, and they're desperate for the work we have. We're paying our white men $35 a month and feeding them. The Chinaman is doing the same work for less on the agricultural lines and feeding himself. I say, give me 50 of them. Let me prove it." The Big Four exchanged looks of profound skepticism. The idea was an affront to the prevailing American racism, but their backs were against a wall of granite and debt. Failure to lay track meant losing the enormous subsidies. Greed, as always, trumped prejudice. Huntington grunted. 50, Crocker. If one of them dies because of this experiment, the press will crucify us. Be discreet. Crocker nodded, a grim, determined fire in his eyes. The decision, driven by economic necessity and desperation, was made. 50 Chinese laborers, men known only by the name of their village, their tongs, or a number on a ledger, were about to be put to the most grueling, dangerous construction work in U.S. history. No one in that room could have imagined that this experiment would quickly grow to an army of nearly 20,000 men, the very backbone of the Central Pacific, all of whom would soon be fighting a silent, deadly, and entirely forgotten war against the Sierra Nevada.